And you mentioned the sort of the goal for 2030, and I looked at the National Irish Organic Strategy, which was released, and I suppose that's a part of that. But knowing that you're kind of like you mentioned, and I know part of your role is to work with farmers and to bring those farmers who are looking to convert to organic to bring them along in terms of education. So like with your feet on the ground and you're speaking to farmers a lot, what are you sort of hearing, in terms of from the strategy, which is all well and good to have a strategy, but in comparison to, the actual real life, what's happening on a farm day to day in terms of conversion, like what do you see as a sort of, is there a gap there, or, what are the challenges in terms of getting to that 2030 vision?
Well, the strategy that you mentioned, Alan, was released, at the National Ploughing Championships in September, and I suppose really, like, to put it in context, that's the roadmap to how everything in the sector ties together and actually, manages to achieve that 10% goal. Because when you look, like, I've been involved in organics, as I said, probably for 25 years, and it's a bit of a, when you start, it's a bit of a, chicken and egg scenario. So, like, the sector is so small that, like, for example, there may not be enough services to support the sector. So, for a farmer might want to grow a specific variety of a crop, it's not available, so they have to import, or, some of the products that organic farmers are permitted to use, that's imported. So, and in terms of education and training, everything like that. So, and it has really, I suppose, increased and expanded in the last couple of years, where it's a bit like the whole sector is getting behind organic, and that needs to happen in order to meet that target. Because for quite a long time, yes, you had pioneers who were driving the sector forward, but it's a lot to do, particularly if you're a producer on the ground, because obviously, that's all, like, time consuming in and of itself. So, and I think it's fantastic to have that roadmap there in terms of the strategy, because it just gives a little bit of a blueprint in terms of what needs to be done, and everything needs to be done. Reality, we need to have, you know, more advice for farmers on the ground, and that's probably, there has been a push to kind of get advisors, involved in organics and getting them, because obviously if a farmer comes in, they've got queries, be it on agronomy or whatever it may be on, they need somewhere that to go to actually be able to get some assistance. So certainly would welcome the roadmap and the strategy, the national strategy. And again, that would be mirrored by a European level across the member states. So each member state would have some, a roadmap similar, specific to their own country and their own internal needs. And it's also to highlight that, I mean, some countries are at 5% organic. So what they've done, like, from an Irish point of view, we need to look at what works in other European countries and what we can do to help farmers here, because it's not like we need to go and reinvent the wheel. We need to see what works in our countries and what we can do here. And at farm level for farmers, this was what I've seen in the last couple of years is, yes, there's been a huge increase of farmers coming in, but farmers are keen as well. And I think, for people who come into the organic sector, for a lot of farmers that I talk to, they've been thinking about it for a while, so, and that's welcome, because you don't want somebody who's going to jump in to, organics because the organic farming scheme is open, which it currently is open. It opened last week and it'll close on the 9th of November. So you don't want people jumping into it just because it's another scheme to jump into it, because you want people coming into organic farming who are going to stay in the sector and contribute to the sector. So, on the ground, there's a lot of people who are positive about the change. They're enthusiastic once they come in. They want to get things right in terms of, passing their inspection every year, like from the certification body. So they want to get things right. They want to sell their product as organic. And a lot of people are just interested in seeing how they can build up their soil health, how they can become good organic farmers. And there always was a saying in organics that if you're a bad or conventional farmer, you definitely won't be a good organic farmer. You do have to be organized. You have to pay attention in terms of husbandry. You've got to be mindful of, because you don't have the backup of going out and, putting on a bag of fertilizer if crops are needed or whatever it may be. So you've got to kind of be on the ground, be observant, be organized. So, I know sometimes with farmers who are maybe organic a while, there's a bit of concern because, oh, suddenly the sector has jumped from 2% to 5% and there's a plan to get to 10%. But actually, we need that groundswell. You need that like level of, critical mass to actually be able to allow the sector to flourish. Because most people, when you explain about organic food, they're actually really keen to support it. And when you look at some of the research that is coming across, it's like younger people, they want to purchase organic food for the environmental benefits, for the health benefits for themselves, and in the wider context of sustainability and climate change. So farmers are keyed into that. And you do hear like, I suppose again, I've been around long enough to hear like some farmers may come in because a scheme is open, like the organic farming scheme, as I currently said, is open now. But farmers are actually really happy once they get their head around what they need to do to pass an inspection. Most farmers are really happy with the system of farming. I remember distinctly one farmer saying to me, I came in because I really just didn't like spraying. So I didn't like spraying. I lived near a town. I knew I was near the water supply. And and he was he was an arable farmer, tillage producer. So he said, and I didn't like actually using chemicals knowing I was close to the water supply for the town. So those kind of comments from farmers, like, that they didn't particularly like using chemicals, don't want to use them. Um, so once they, and you kind of stress to people, look, you've taken on a new way of system, a new way of farming, you know, it's not a good idea to go and develop a new enterprise immediately. Get your head around what you need to do and kind of look at it over the long term. Because as I said, the organic farming scheme is open now. So if people are interested, now is a good time to explore it. But again, it's something to look at for the longer term. And, prior to, the last couple of years, the level of fallout from once people go organic is quite small. It tends to be people have either retired or, or whatever. So people don't come in, then go out, go back, so once people kind of farm organically, for the most part, they're actually really happy with the farming system. And organic farmers in the past have been really good to share amongst each other, various organic practices. There's been loads of farm walks, and there's always been a very kind of, I suppose, helpful mentoring kind of informally in the sector, to kind of encourage people in and wants to come in if they have queries, to actually assist people on how things are going, because it's in everybody's interest if you come into organic farming and you do it well, and it benefits the sector right across the board.
Yeah, and I'd say just I spent 2 weekends with yourself, Grace, and in a room full of farmers with no farming experience, and I learned more about farming and organic farming. But I also sort of saw that sort of knowledge sharing that you're speaking about, how I suppose farming can be sometimes can be a very individual sort of the knowledge stays within families and it stays within sort of those little pockets. And I think seeing that sort of room of people, sharing ideas, and it's really encouraging to see that, not only for organics but also for farming in general, sort of to see that that's kind of, if that's what organics is, then it's just another benefit to it. And
Yeah, absolutely. And,
yeah,
and y- you know, the community among organic farmers has always been strong. You know what I mean? So, and nice. So that's good to encourage that as well. I suppose it's up to everybody to encourage it in the sector, because, again, you don't want people coming in and kind of not knowing what they're doing for a couple of years. It's always better to find out. I'd always say to people, look, when you come into organics, find out in your area who's organic, and see if you can meet them for a cup of coffee or whatever. Ring them up and see what's going on. What did you do in this instance, or or how do you overcome this issue, or like in the case too of your certification body, I'd say, ring the Irish Organic Association if you have any queries about your farm. I mean, they can't give out advice. We're not, permitted to do that, but they can certainly say, well, most farmers would do X, Y, or Z in that instance. So, like, certainly don't feel, I think, to people, the key thing is once you come into organic that you're on your own and you're out on the farm on your own, you've got to make these decisions. But you do need to reach out into the network that's there, and the farm walks are a really good way to do that.
actually, yeah, and our farm market was a good day as well, so would encourage that. So I suppose just conscious of time here. So I had three quickfire questions that I'd like to ask. We'll see how quickfire they are. But first one is, what's one organic food you can't live without?
God, I'd have to say maybe wheat for bread because I'm doing big at the minute. So organic.
Okay, very practical. I like it.
Most high on milk. With kids in the house, you go to organic milk like it's no tomorrow. Even the cow at the back, but we don't have
Calcium.
stuff. Seriously, sorry,
No, it's okay. So what's the most rewarding part of working in organics?
okay, so I suppose it is that you feel like maybe you're doing something right for the planet, for if you're producing good quality food that isn't harmful, and it's also practical. It's something. Sometimes I think you can easily be overwhelmed. If you start to delve into the environment, and what we do for future generations. Where do you start? The small steps. So for me, certainly working in the organic sector, I think at least I feel in some way I'm doing something practical that can help to sustain the planet for future generations.
Like that. Yeah, that's good. And then finally, if you could change one thing about how people think about their food, what would it be?
Well, I think, cost isn't always what the price says, when you're seeing if it's a price of something, like there's a lot of hidden costs. So I think if people, I know people are time poor, I'm time poor, we're all time poor, but to actually, give it a try and buy some organic food, like, preferably directly from the local producer, cook it up, and I think this thing in COVID came up, the term scratch cooking, like, and it was kind of amusing to a lot of us who would always cook from scratch. I live in the countryside, you don't have the option of Just Eat or whoever you may call or Deliveroo. So, you actually buy in ingredients and cook and it is actually, economical. I was just chatting to an organic farmer actually the other day about the whole concept of, I think it came up, the cornflake day, in terms of recessions and things like that and the cost of food. But actually, and people were saying, they didn't have enough money to buy a box of cornflakes for their kids, to feed them. And actually, you will get a bag of oats, organic oats, cheaper, than you will a box of cornflakes. So sometimes we need to just think about the context of, and it will be more nutritious. So you need to think about, well, actually, if you buy direct and buy less and maybe plan things out a bit better, you can eat healthier. So it's not always just about the cost. That's on the shelf. I was at the Irish Organic Association. We had our AGM in September, and I know this is not necessarily quickfire, but somebody and from the Urban Co-op said, research that she was looking at said the top three food selling items in Ireland, now food/drink, are Coke, Lucozade, and Tato.
Wow.
So that's not hugely hugely positive in terms of what people are eating. So I think we need to have a whole kind of change in terms of education about food, and and priorities. I know people money is always an issue, but I think I saw the other day that was 18% is what people spend on food now, comparable to 1980s. So, which was about 30 something percent. So 18% is still a lot, but at the same time, we need food to survive. So I think we need to kind of prioritize what type of food we are purchasing.
Yeah. And I think from my point of view, like I suppose going to the organic farming sort of course really opened my eyes to the true sort of price of food. And since then I've spoken to a lot of people, and that's why I sort of wanted to bring on the podcast, because I think food is something which we sort of take for granted in this country, especially. But like to hear those are the top three sort of brands that are eaten, and if you think of our history of food and our history of sort of producing food, and we talked about the market, the farmers markets earlier, and how there's farmers markets around the country. I was in one in Skibbereen there a few months ago, and that was incredible to see, sort of a huge sort of car park full of farmers from the local area. And I think people just, as you say, have to be a little bit more conscious in terms of, okay, look at the economics of it, but also like look at the sort of the options that we have, and just kind of spend a little more time thinking about their food and not just kind of going to the shop and picking up the first thing you see. And it's just taking that step outside yourself and thinking, okay, like what like, I suppose thinking long term as a consumer and a producer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you can, this thing of, anyway, I won't get into it's, but you can eat well, supporting local producers, on a budget.
Yeah, absolutely.
It depends on who you are like, so sometimes you just need to, as you say, maybe go down locally, see what is being produced and see what you can do with that, rather than, like 85% of food is purchased in supermarkets in Ireland. You know what I mean? So it's like that's the main outlet, but there are other options out there if you get a chance to explore them.
100%. Okay, Grace, it's been great learning again about your journey, and I suppose learning about how organic sort of work, and it's great to share that as well. And thanks for your time coming on the podcast. I really appreciate
Thanks for the opportunity, Ellen.
it.